Hello! It's a beautiful day today, and I'm here with my friend Richard. And it's also a great day to continue Egil's saga. Alright, Richie, let's dive in, shall we? Alright. There was a man called Kettlelang, whose parents were Earl Thorkel of Naumdal and Hrafnild, daughter of Kettlehang from Hrafnista. Hang was a man of good reputation and noble birth. He had been a great friend of Thorolf Kveldofsson, who was his kinsman. He had taken part in the call to arms when forces were mustered in Halagaland to support Thorolf, as written above. When King Harold left the north, and it became known that Thorolf had been killed, the forces disbanded. Hang turned back with 60 men and went to Torgar, where they encountered Hildered's sons, who had only a small force with them. On reaching the farm, Hang attacked them. Hildered's sons were killed there, along with most of the others, and Hang and his men seized all the booty they could take. Afterwards, Hang took the 2 largest Norse he was able to find and loaded them with all the belongings he could manage to take with him. He put on board his wife and children and all the men who had taken part in his deeds. Baug, Hang's foster brother, a wealthy man of good family, was at the helm of one of the Norse. When they were ready to sail and the wind was favorable, they put out to sea. A few years previously, Ingolf and Hjorleif had gone to settle in Iceland. And there's a footnote there, which I would like to read to you. It says that Ingolf Arnason, the first settler of Iceland, who made his home in Reykjavik, and his sworn brother, Hjorleif Hrodmundarson. So they had gone to settle in Iceland. Their voyage was much talked about, and people said there was plenty of good land available. Hang sailed westwards in search of Iceland, and he and his men sighted land when they were off the south coast. But because of the stormy weather and heavy waves breaking on the shores and the poor harbours, they sailed westwards along the Icelandic coast, past the sands. When the storm began to lull and the seas calmed, they came to a large estuary in which they sailed their ships and moored off the eastern shore. This river is now called Thorsa, and was much narrower and deeper then. They unloaded their ships and set off to explore the land east of the river, moving their livestock there afterwards. Hang wintered on the west side of the Outaranga River, and when spring came, he explored the land to the east, claiming the territory between the Thjorsa and Markaflot rivers, from mountain to shore, and built a farmstead at Hof by East Ragna. In the spring of their first year in Iceland, Kettlehang's wife Ingunn gave birth to a boy they called Hrafn, and after they took down the buildings there, the place became known as Hrafnstoftur. Hang gave Baug the land in Fjords, from the Merkia River down to the river west of Breidabolstad. Baug lived at Hilderendi, and the large family in that district is descended from him. Hang gave land to some of his ship's crew and sold land for a low price to others, and they are also considered among the original settlers. One of Hang's sons, Storolf, owned the land at Vol and Storolfsvoll. He was the father of Orm the Strong. Another of his sons, Herwolf, owned the land in Flotshild, bordering on Baug's, out to the brook at Volslake. He lived at the foot of the slopes at Brekkur, and was the father of Sumaliri, whose son was Vertaliri the poet. Heng had a third son, Helgi, who lived at Veller, and owned the land there as far as the boundary of his brother's farms by the East Ranga River. Vestar, Heng's fourth son, owned the land east of Renga, between that river and Vera, on the lower part of Storolfsvoll. His wife was Maud, the daughter of Hildir from Hildesi, and they had a daughter called Asni, who married Ulfeig Grettir. Vestar lived at Moidervoll. Raffen, Heng's fifth son, became the first law speaker in Iceland. He lived at Hof after his father died. Thorlaug, Raffen's daughter, married Jorun the Goldie, and their son was Valgard from Hof. Hrafn was the most prominent of Heng's sons. When Kveldolf heard about the death of his son, Thorolf, he was so saddened by the news that he took to his bed, overcome by grief and old age. Skallagrim went to see him regularly and tried to talk him round. He told him to take heart, saying that nothing was less becoming to him than to be bedridden. A more suitable course would be to take vengeance for Thorolf, he said. There is a chance that we will come within reach of the men who are responsible for Thorolf's death. If not, there are men we can take that would not be to the king's liking. Then Gveldolf spoke a verse. The spinner of fate is grim to me. I hear that Thorolf has met his end, on a northern isle too early. The Thunderer chose the swinger of swords, the hag of old age who once wrestled with Thor, has left me unprepared to join the Valkyrie's clash of steel. Urge as my spirit may, my revenge will not be swift. That summer, King Harald went to Uppland, and in the autumn he headed westwards to Valdres, all the way to Voss. Olver was with the king and often suggested to him that he should consider making compensation for Thorolf, by offering Gveldolf and Skallagrim money for some honour they would accept. The king did not rule out the possibility entirely, if Gveldolf and his son would come to see him. Then Olver set off northwards for Fjordane, not stopping until he reached Gveldolf and his son one evening. They were grateful to him for his visit, and he spent some time there. Gveldolf asked Olver about the entire incident at Sandnes when Thorolf was killed, about the worthy deeds he had done in battle before his death, and who had struck him down, where his worst wounds were, and how he had died. Olver told him everything he asked, mentioning that King Harald had dealt him a blow that by itself would have sufficed to kill a man, and that Thorolf had dropped face down at the king's feet. Gveldolf said, You have spoken well, because old men have said that a man's death would be avenged if he dropped face down, and vengeance taken on the man at whose feet he fell. But it is unlikely that we will enjoy the good fortune to do so. Olver told Gveldolf and his son that he expected the king to show them great honour if they would go to see him and seek recompense. Speaking at great length, he asked them to take the risk. Gveldolf said he would not go anywhere on account of his old age. I will stay at home, he said. Do you want to go, Grim? Asked Olver. I do not feel I have any reason to, said Grim. The king will not be impressed by my eloquence, and I do not think I would spend much time asking him for recompense. Olver said he would not need to anyway. We will say everything on your behalf as well as we can. Olver was so insistent that Grim eventually promised to go when he felt ready. When the two of them had settled the time Grim was to meet the king, Olver left and went back to him. Skallagrim prepared for this journey and chose the strongest and boldest of his men and neighbours to go with him. There is a man named Ani, a wealthy farmer, another called Grani, and Grimolf and his brother Grim, who lived on Skallagrim's farm, and their brothers Thorbjorn Hunchback and Thord Hobbler. They were known as Thorarna's sons. She lived near Skallagrim and was a sorceress. Hobbler was a coal-biter, which means a layabout in his youth, but he later proved his worth. Other men in the band were Thorir the giant and his brother Thorgir Earthlong, a hermit called Odd, and a freeman called Grease. In all, there were 12 in the party, all outstandingly powerful men, and many of them were shapeshifters. Taking an old ferry that Skallagrim owned, they followed the shore southwards and put down anchor in Osterfjord, then went overland to Voss, to the lake that had to be crossed on the route they had chosen. They procured a suitable oared ship there and rowed across the lake to a place not far from where the king was attending a feast. Grim and his men arrived when the king was sitting at table. They met some people in the yard, spoke to them, and asked if there was any news. When they had been told what was going on, Grim asked someone to call out Olver to speak to him. The man went into the room to where Olver was sitting and told him, A party of 12 of men has just turned up, if men is the right word, but they are more like giants than human beings in size and appearance. Olver stood up immediately and went outside, guessing who it was, who had arrived. He welcomed his kinsman Grin and invited him to join in the room. Grim said to his companions, "It is said to be the custom here to meet the king unarmed. 6 of us will go inside, and the other 6 stay outside to look after the weapons." Then they went inside. Olver went up to the king, and Skallagrim was standing behind him. "Grim, Gveldof's son, is here now," Olver announced. "We would be grateful if you make his journey here worthwhile, as we are sure you will. Many people receive great honor from you who are less worthy of it than he is, and nowhere near as accomplished in most of his skills. You could do what matters more than any other thing to me, king, if you feel it is important." Olver spoke at length and cleverly, because he was an eloquent man. Many friends of Olver's approached the king and put the matter to him as well. The king looked around and saw a man standing behind Olver, a whole head taller than all the others, and bald. "Is that great man Skallagrim?" he asked. Grim said the king had recognized him. "If you are seeking compensation for Thorolf," said the king, "I want you to become one of my men, join their company, and enter my service. I may be pleased enough with your service to give you compensation for your brother Thorolf, or no less honor than I showed him. But you should be sure to act more carefully than he did, if I make you a man of his stature." Skallagrim answered, "Everyone knows that Thorolf was much more able than I am in all respects, but he lacked the good fortune to serve you properly. I will not take that course. I will not serve you, because I know I lack the good fortune to serve you the way I would like, and that you deserve. I imagine I would lack many of Thorolf's qualities." The king fell silent, and his face turned blood red. Olver turned away immediately, and asked Grim and his men to leave. They did so, left and took their weapons, and Olver told them to get away as quickly as they could. Olver accompanied them to the lake with a large band of men. Before he parted company with Skallagrim, Olver said to him, "Your visit to the king turned out differently from what I would have wished, kinsman. I urged you to come here, but now I must ask you to go home as quickly as you can, and also not to go to see King Harold unless you two are on better terms than you seem to be now. Keep your guard against the king and his men." Then Grim and his men crossed the lake, while Olver's men went to where the ships were beached, and hacked away at them until they were unseaworthy, because they had seen a large band of men leaving the king's quarters, heavily armed and moving at great speed. King Harold had sent them after Grim to kill him. Shortly after Grim and his men had left, the king had begun to speak. "I can see that huge bald man is as vicious as a wolf, and will do harm to men over whose loss I would grieve, if he gets hold of them. That bald character cannot be expected to spare any of you. The people he claims have done him wrong if he has a chance. Go after him now and kill him." Then they left and went to the lake, but could not find any seaworthy ships. They returned to tell the king what had happened, saying that Grim and his men would have made it across the lake by then. Skallagrim proceeded on his way with his companions until he reached home, and he told Gveldolf about the outcome of their journey. Gveldolf was pleased that Grim had not gone to the king in order to enter his service, and repeated that they would receive nothing but harm from the king, and no reparation. Gveldolf and Skallagrim discussed over and over again what to do, and were in complete agreement that they would not stay in the country, any more than other people who were engaged in disputes with the king. Their only alternative was to leave Norway, and they were attracted by the idea of going to Iceland, where they had heard of the fine land that was available. Their friends and acquaintances, Ingolf Arneson and his companions, had already gone to Iceland to claim land and settle there, and had found land for the taking, and were free to choose wherever they wanted to live. The outcome of their deliberations was to abandon their farm and leave the country. Thorir Hordsson had been brought up as Gveldolf's foster son when he was very young, and was the same age as Skallagrim. They were close friends as well as foster brothers. Thorir was one of the king's landholders at the time this all happened, but he and Skallagrim remained constant friends. Early in the spring, Gveldolf and his men prepared their ships. They had many fine ships and manned 2 large Nors with 30 able men on each, not counting women and children. They took all the possessions they could, but no one dared to buy their land from them, for fear of the king's power. When they were ready, they set sail and headed for the Solent Islands, where there are so many big islands with bays and coves that few people are said to know of all the harbors there.